Hey everybody, did you know that the very first chiropractor said he got his inspiration from a literal ghost? Here's a quote from the founder of chiropractic, and yes, that's what you call a chiropractic practitioner thing, science, pseudoscience, whatever. Daniel David Palmer, who says, "The knowledge and philosophy given to me by Dr. Jim Atkinson, an intelligent spiritual being, together with explanations of phenomena, principles resolved from causes, effects, powers, laws, and utility, appealed to my reason. The method by which I obtained an explanation of certain physical phenomena from an intelligence in the spiritual world is known in biblical language as inspiration." Now, personally, I like to take my medicine from people who don't talk to ghosts, but that's just me. If you do like to talk to ghosts for your medical inspirations, then hey, come call into the show because the show is starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you can do that at 512-991-9242, or you can call through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. As always, Truth Wanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We also want to welcome our new viewers watching on Twitter and Twitch, as well as give love to all the folks watching on YouTube. And every single week, folks, we always have a special guest. This week is no different. It's Scott Dickey coming back on the show. Scott Dickey, how are you doing?
Hey, Dan, I'm doing great. I'm anxious to be back. Sorry, I brought the technical difficulties with me last time I was here. So hopefully that was all.
Yes.
We got that glitch out of the way, and now we're ready to dive in and deal with some callers today. I'm looking forward to it.
I hope so, Scott. So, those of you who aren't aware, a few weeks back, Scott was on, but our call-in studio was down. So, we gave Scott a mulligan, and we want him to come back on the show so we can have the full Truth Wanted experience, because I think that's fair.
Definitely.
So, Scott, welcome back to the program. What has been happening since then, since last time we spoke?
Well, just getting ready for the school year coming up. I was able to attend the Bat Cruise a few weeks ago. I was able to get down to Austin, and I met lots of cool people. I was looking forward to meeting some fellow nonprofits, and it was really great experience. All of the ACA people that I've met have across the board been very positive, very friendly, very thoughtful, and it was just a great experience all around. The bats even showed up. That's always good. I mean, it makes for a successful bat cruise when the bats decide to come out. But you know what? Even if I had never seen a bat while I was there, it still would have been well worth the trip. It was a lot of fun, and meeting some cool people and meeting some people that I hadn't met before. I got to see the shows recorded live the next day, and just an awesome all around experience.
Awesome. I'm really sad that I didn't get to go. I was in Montreal, Canada, last weekend. So that's why.
If you got to miss the Bat Cruise, then Canada's a good excuse.
Canada, I think it's a good excuse. I always said Canada is just a mining company in disguise, but it is, in fact, a real place you can visit, especially in Montreal. So that was really cool. The weather was much nicer than it was in Austin that weekend, I'm sure. So yeah, fun stories about that. And maybe I'll get to some of that today. But Scott, I want to talk about something else entirely. I want to talk about kind of what we talked about in our opening here. I want to talk about chiropractic. Okay, that's right, baby. We got the truth bombs. Truth bombs coming back.
All right, bring it.
So before we do that, though, we have to go to our We Want the Truth segment, because every single week we're always asking you folks something we want to know about you and your responses to our prompts. That kind of made sense as a sentence. Don't think about it too hard. Last week we asked you, what is something you wish you never learned? And here are our favorite answers. Number 3 comes from the Gaming Atheist. I wish I never learned that most pigs are stunned via gas chambers. It's not worth the delicious bacon. I'll just eat something else. Hail seitan, and that's seitan spelled Seitan for the delicious meat substitute. So there you go. Yes, that is a fact. I don't know. I don't know if it's. I think it's. I want to say it's more than half. I don't know if it's most, but yeah, definitely a lot of pigs are stunned via gas chambers. That is how pigs are killed. So there you go. A little bit of vegan propaganda in our top 3 picks, and I didn't even pick this one. So there you go. Number 2, coming from Valerie Williams, who says something I wish I never learned, that a seagull can swallow a live squirrel whole. Can't unsee
Ooh.
that TikTok. I have seen that video.
Oh.
And I have seen, actually the worst I've seen is a pelican swallowing a seagull. And that's why you cannot
Ooh.
trust birds.
Is
If
that like a turducken kind of thing? Did the seagull swallow the squirrel, and then the pelican swallows the seagull? And
it's probably one of those things. My only commentary on that is, if I were the author of the book of Genesis, I would not have chosen the snake as a representation of the devil. I would have chosen birds, because I think birds are low key kind of evil. But that's just my thing. Don't like birds too much. Although maybe somebody's going to give me a bird one day and I'll change my mind. Number 1, though, comes from Nick Knows Nothing, who says, I wish I never learned that some vanilla flavoring and perfume scents come from beaver butts. Ew, gross.
I think
Yeah.
that's kind of awesome. We get something positive out of it there. Normally that would be an area where you don't expect anything good to come out of it, but we get vanilla flavoring from beaver butts. I
guess
never
so.
knew that.
My butt is not nearly as productive as beaver butts, as I just learned. So yeah, there's some 3 things that most of you probably shouldn't have learned, maybe couldn't have learned until you've been on this show now. So
Too late
congratulations.
now. Too late. You
Too
learned all
late.
3 of them now.
Too
Can't,
late.
no
Too late.
going
Too late.
back.
The prompt for this week, though, is, what is your favorite random fact? So I think this will also be an interesting prompt, kind of in tandem with our previous one. Now, what is your favorite random fact?
My favorite random fact, I think, I have kind of an ironic sense of humor. So if I had to have a favorite random fact, it would be kind of something that maybe goes against the expectations, that kind of breaks stereotypes and things like that. For example, most of us probably know that Brian May from the Queen, he has a PhD in astrophysics. Or Dexter Holland he's the lead singer in the band Offspring. He just got a PhD in microbiology. So I love it when we have these people that we wouldn't expect to be doing this kind of thing, and they find out, we find out that they have these deep interests. So, but out of all of those, my favorite random fact, I think, would have to be star of the silver screen from the 30s and 40s, Hedy Lamarr. She was actually a self-taught academician, and she has many patents and has worked with electrical engineering and radio engineering. She helped design patents for torpedo guidance and for technologies that were eventually used with Wi-Fi and GPS and Bluetooth. So I think that would have to be my favorite random fact. Although, as a runner-up, I'm going to throw in something that I just learned just randomly a couple days ago, and that is in Norway, the Norwegians have a word that means chaotic and kind of a crazy things happening, and that word is Texas. And I looked it up.
What, really?
They use the word Texas to describe crazy, chaotic, over the top things, and so that's legit. That's legit. That has to be a runner up for me, I think.
My favorite random fact is, it's a common misconception that humans have an underdeveloped sense of smell. And that's not actually true. We actually have a very similar sense of smell to other animals. And we even are more sensitive to some odors than some dogs and rats, which I think is kind of interesting. So
that's a good random fact.
So it's a little random fact for you there. So
yeah, definitely.
Leave us your favorite random fact below in the comments, and we're gonna pick the top 3 for next week. So check that out. Now, let's talk about, again, truth bombs. I'm bringing back truth bombs. I always saying I'm bringing back truth bombs, and then I don't bring back truth bombs. This is a week where I'm bringing back truth bombs, Scott. And I got one. This is one I wanted to talk about for a while. It's been in my back pocket. And so I'm glad that I get to talk about it with you, Scott, because it's a weird one, and it may be a more controversial one, I think, because there are a lot of people that still think this is a legit sort of thing. And I'm talking about chiropractic, of course.
Mm.
It's not chiropractic. You say chiropractic, which is a weird thing. You'd think it'd be chiropractic, but it is chiropractic. Anyway, chiropractic, right? This practice of manipulating people's spines, right? Doing all this kinds of stuff, getting out the subluxations, as they call it. We'll get into that in just a second here. But what's your experience with the art of chiropractic,
The
Scott? Do you
art
have
of
any?
chiropractic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Careful not to call it the science of chiropractic there,
Sure.
though. My experience is very little. I've never visited a chiropractor, although I have friends that have. And I might be wrong. I guess I've never really looked. I haven't done quite a deep dive into it as you have, but I always thought that there was like legit chiropractic where they did things like if you hurt your back or if you have like vertebrae out of alignment or something like that, that they could actually do stuff, or if you had like a nerve pinch in your neck or something like that. And then there was the other chiropractic stuff, things like, oh, if I massage this part of your foot, then your flu will go away and stuff like that. So, that's about my extent. I did have some friends once that um, would take their kids for adjustments, and that really bothered me. That really bothered me seeing that. Um, but
Yeah.
that's roughly the extent of my experience with chiropractic, is just being an observer on the sideline.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. This is me jumping ahead here, but I will address that. So this is actually a very common conception that people have, that there is these sort of more woo-oriented chiropractors and some that are more like science-based, right? So the chiropractic community actually has a term for this. They call them straights and mixers, right?
Hmm.
So the difference here is that the straights, right? The straights in chiropractic are the ones who are the vitalistic kinds, the ones who talk about some of these more kind of spiritual practices, sometimes the ones that kind of get to the heart of the origins of chiropractic, which is very spiritually motivated, and I'm going to talk
Hmm.
about that. And then there's the mixers, the ones who are trying to sort of incorporate scientific method, some more kinds of data, some more kinds of practices that are outside of the traditional school of chiropractic. There's also like differences in how they understand terminology, like subluxation, which is another
Hmm.
word that we're going to dive into there. There's chiropractors that disagree on what exactly a subluxation is, even though it really is at the heart of chiropractic. So we're getting into this. And again, I think this is going to be very controversial because a lot of you folks at home, and I know folks personally who go to chiropractors who consider it a very beneficial practice. And I want to be very clear up front as I'm talking about this subject today. I am not saying that there aren't positive benefits to going to a chiropractor. I think that has been demonstrated that there are definitely positive benefits, but there's also super, super, super big risks on top of that, as well as some ideas that you might be surprised at how wooey they really get when you study the heart of it. But this is the big problem, because there are multiple sorts of organizations that even regulate chiropractic. You do not have to go to medical school to be a chiropractor. If you're going to a chiropractor, they are likely not an MD. They may have gone to a chiropractic school, but that is not the same thing as a medical school.
Hmm.
And again, it varies from different countries as far as what kinds of licensures you can have. And in some places, you don't even have to go to a school at all. You can just kind of say, yeah, this is the thing I do, depending on how the country operates and regulates its laws there. So let's
Hmm.
go from the very beginning here, Scott. We're
All
going
right.
we're going back to the past, and we're going to talk about a guy who I quoted at the beginning of this episode. This is Daniel David Palmer. Daniel David Palmer was the OG chiropractor. He immigrated to the United States in 1865, and before he was doing his chiropractor stuff, he was into magnetic healing. Have you ever heard of magnetic healing?
Who hasn't, right? Isn't that like a mainstream medical procedure? Just
Oh yeah, I just got a magnetic healing procedure last week,
yeah, yeah,
right? Yeah.
sure, sure.
Yeah. So obviously, what the heck is that? Well, so the idea, right, is that so there's like iron in people's blood, right? There's
That's a
hemoglobin, which is
fact.
like the
That's a truth.
protein, right? The
Okay.
blood protein that carries oxygen. And so this idea is like, well, maybe we can actually like manipulate people's hemoglobin by like using magnets on people's bodies, which is like not how that works. But
Okay.
there's some different like sort of outbranching ideas that come from that, but obviously, the whole practice is bunk, right?
So
Like,
this guy was leaving behind the magnetic healing because
yes,
he had discovered, oh no, this,
this
this.
is well, yeah, this is legit. And again, there's different sort of accounts of how exactly he came to this conclusion, but he has written several times that he has, and that was not like a joke quote, literally like a ghost like told him that this is how you should do things. That is what he
Hmm.
claims. Dr. Jim Atkinson was not somebody who was contemporary to his time period. He was a dead person that he claimed he could talk to through a spirit medium.
Wait, you said he was a doctor?
Dr. Jim Atkinson, the guy who he talked to, who
Okay.
claimed that who told him about this practice. Yes,
So
was
did the guy become a doctor and then die and become a ghost, or did he die and then get
and then
his
get his MD
his
while he
his
was
his
dead.
ghost doctoral degree afterwards,
Yeah,
or
like a Beetlejuice situation. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm
hmm,
assuming he got his MD while he was alive. I actually don't know much about Jim Atkinson. I didn't look
hmm,
too much into him.
okay.
But I did look into Daniel David Palmer, which if you're gonna be a grifter, by the way, which full disclosure, if you think there are chiropractors today that are doing good work, and maybe you are one, sure, maybe Daniel David Palmer, full on grifter. Okay, you cannot convince me otherwise. Dude was absolutely just out of his mind. Okay,
Hmm.
so yeah, if you're gonna be a grifter, you have to have the three names, the Daniel David Palmer. That's
I think that's
the
part of
trademark.
that's part of the license application, I
It's
think.
it's part of the license application.
Yeah.
You gotta submit that. But anyway, so here's the basic idea. Oh, he was also against other stuff, mainstream medicine as well too, including vaccinations. So anti-vax sentiments here too in the beginning of chiropractic practice. And
So it's
here,
a truth bomb with multiple warheads is what
oh
you're
yeah,
saying. All
dude, I'm
right.
telling you, this is a big one. It's a big one, and it's crazy that a lot of people don't know the origins of it because it's like weirdly spiritual. It's like very weird. So basically, Palmer had this idea that there are people that have natural healing powers, right? And it's done through the nervous system, right? So if any one organ was affected by a kind of illness, it must not be receiving its normal nerve supply is what he called it, which he dubbed it as a spinal misalignment.
Ah, I
The
see.
otherwise
Okay.
known as a subluxation. Okay,
Hmm.
so he saw chiropractic as a way to sort of reorient that. So when you hear subluxations, you're thinking, oh, maybe it's like fixing your vertebrae and stuff. And like maybe again, that's what chiropractors are using today. But he specifically was like, nah, it's about your basically your spiritual ability to heal yourself, like your nervous system's ability to heal yourself, which is again not how any of that actually works. But
Wait,
there you
is the
go.
subluxation the problem, or is the subluxation the solution to the problem?
Let's detour on that a little bit because I have a whole thing on subluxation.
All right, all
Okay,
right. So I'm
so
just messing you up here. Sorry.
no, 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 no. Let's talk about it because this is again a word that's used that many people might not really understand the origins or the reasons why it's used. So it's supposed to be like a dislocation of a joint or an organ. So the World Health Organization has a definition of subluxation, which is a significant structural displacement. But therefore, it has to be done on stuff like X-rays and stuff. Okay, so that's what's visible. Is in the World Health Organization's mind, that kind of stuff can be counted as a subluxation, but that's
Hmm.
not what chiropractors say is a subluxation. Subluxations, specifically vertebral subluxations, may or may not actually be visible on X-rays, and it may not even cause clear pain or dysfunction at all. It's basically the stuff that people complain about. They say, "Oh, I have maybe a back issue," and the chiropractors come in and say, "Oh, it's because of your, we have these subluxations, right?"
Hmm.
So it's kind of the problem that does need to be fixed. So there's kind of the difference there because again, the mixers that I was talking about earlier, the mixer chiropractors are going to use the term subluxation to refer to more to that World Health Organization. In other words, something that can be visibly, sort of empirically seen. Whereas
Hmm.
the other ones are going to be like, nah, man, it's just whatever problems you have that you can't connect to your organs, right? Again, your mileage is going to vary because different chiropractors can kind of practice and say different things. So again,
So the you when you say the mixers and what was the other one?
mixers and straights.
The
That's
mixers
the
and the
terms
straight.
that are
You know,
used.
when you said
Mhm.
that, I first went to the outsiders. I was thinking
It
the
does sound like
stoches
the
and the
outsiders.
greasers, and
It does sound like yeah, it does sound
do
like
they have
an
like
outsider.
battles or anything, or do they have
I think
chiropractic throwdowns or?
yeah, I think they pull out pocket knives and they start like fighting each
Hmm,
other. And Rob Lowe is somehow in the mix too,
of
as well.
course,
I don't
right?
know how, but he's there. So anyway, so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about subluxations, okay? But again, Daniel David Palmer's ideas, which is mainly what I want to stick to today. He was talking about this spiritual sort of dysfunction,
Okay.
which is again a little kind of cuckoo, kind of bananas, in my opinion. So on top of this sort of origins of chiropractic, right? So basically, you know, he's this magnetic healer for a while, and then he supposedly has sort of this spiritual visit, and he is visiting mediums at the time, right? So he's very much into this sort of spiritualism, and he starts to write about this chiropractic practice. Okay, so this original story goes like this: in 1895, he was practicing a magnetic healing in an office when he encountered somebody's janitor at this building, right? And this janitor was severely hearing impaired, right? And so Palmer said that there was a palpable lump in his back that he noticed that was related to his hearing disability somehow. And so, according to the story, Palmer then treated his back and claimed to have successfully restored his
Hmm.
hearing. And so, this is like the first sort of
Did he
uh,
magnetically treat his back,
no,
or
no, no.
was
So
it?
this is his first time doing
Oh, okay.
chiropractic practice here. So he
All
he
right.
was there at the building to do magnetic healing on somebody else,
All
and the
right.
janitor at this building is like apparently has this hearing problem, which he was able to fix
Okay.
by fixing his back there.
So
Now
had he spoken to the ghost yet at this point, or was he just kind of, did he have this
it's
natural chiropractic ability, or?
So it's again the history is sort of unclear, and actually I was literally about to get to this, right? So the
Oh,
first even account of how this story came to be like in disarray. Harvey's daughter, the guy who Harvey Lillard, who is the guy who had the who was the janitor with the hearing impairment,
mhm,
recounts a very different interaction between the two men and claims that Palmer overheard Harvey telling a joke just outside of his office and joined to catch up at the end of it. And when he heard the punchline, Palmer slapped him on the back. And then a few days later, Lillard, the guy who was the janitor, remarked that his hearing had improved since
mm,
Palmer had slapped him on the back, and which Palmer then took as inspiration to treat the vertebrae as a means to cure disease. And just to put a fine point on this, right? This is Palmer's whole idea. It's not just to cure back misalignments. Okay. Again, I need to emphasize this. It's literally to cure your spiritual and physical malfunctions. Like this is meant to cure all sorts of things. It's not just like, oh, I'm having an achy back. According to this story, by using chiropractic, he was literally able to make this apparently mostly deaf man, or at least severely hearing impaired man, able to hear again.
mhm.
Which is just, I mean, just wild, right? Like, imagine
I'm a
like
little skeptical, I think. I'm a
I'm
little
a little,
skeptical here.
I would hope you would be skeptical at it, but
Yeah,
this is like the turn of the 19th century here, so you can get away with a lot of things, uh,
apparently.
which is really cool. Any questions so far about Palmer and his work? Because I know I have a few.
I'm just soaking it up. I'm just soaking it up. So what do you got?
Okay, so he talks a lot about this practice, and there's probably evidence that he was inspired by some of the principles of osteopathy, which is a whole other pseudoscientific endeavor, which is for another truth bomb. We don't have time to get into it here, but that has another sort of spiritual origins to this,
Mm,
right? The idea here is that by doing these sort of spinal manipulations, you can not only heal people's processes, heal people's physical processes and sort of spiritual processes in his mind, but there was a little bit more to it. It was more like all human problems could be solved by this. Here's a direct quote from him. He said, "A subluxated vertebrae is the cause of 95% of all diseases. The
Wow.
other 5% is caused by displaced joints other than those by the vertebral column." So he's like
Huh.
all in, okay? He's not just saying like, "Oh, it can fix a cold." It's everything, which is just
Hmm.
wild. Like, why are we even taking medication? You know, like, why are we even doing this? We should all just go to a chiropractor, right?
Right,
And get
right.
everything figured out.
Clearly, it's big pharma is pushing us away from this obvious free truth, right? It's, I mean, it's if you can treat just by messing around with somebody's back, you don't need expensive medicine, you don't need expensive medical equipment, you don't need expensive, X-ray and MRI. Well, although the MRI, right, that's with the magnets.
That does have the magnets in
So
it.
maybe that could be related in there.
I think that's related. I think magnetic healing and MRI scans are definitely related.
Doctors use magnetic healing on a daily basis, apparently. So
Yeah.
maybe he needs to go back to the leave the chiropractic behind and go back to the magnetic stuff.
His next thing is being an MRI. If he was alive today, he'd be an MRI technician, and then he'd start telling you about, I don't know, auras or something that you could
Could
pick up
be,
on MRI
could be.
machines. But okay, so a few years later, in 1897, he founds the Palmer School and Cure in Davenport, which was later renamed to the Palmer College of Chiropractic.
Hmm.
So he's teaching other people about this thing, and I guess you can just start a school, just start a medical school in
The
1897.
PCC, right? It's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we're all familiar.
One of the advantages, though, of being the only practitioner of a particular form of medicine is that you have no peers. There's no peer review. There are no other chiropractors, and so if you get in on the ground floor, free
That's
pass,
true.
free
That's
pass.
true. You're the authority because like
Right,
you kind of start
exactly.
it. So apparently you can start a school, but you can't keep practicing a medical license because in 1906 Palmer was prosecuted under the new medical arts law in Iowa for practicing medicine without a license and
Hmm.
chose to go to jail instead of paying the fine.
Did
So
he tell him about the ghost thing?
I
That
dude,
wasn't
that would have
okay.
been my first thing as
Yeah.
well. I would have said, "Yeah, listen, I got ghosts that can verify for me, it's
Right,
done."
right.
But anyway, he ended up only spending 17 days in jail and then elected to pay the fine later. So I guess jail time was like not good enough for him. I don't know, maybe he wasn't making enough money in jail. He wanted to keep going on his grift or whatever. But later on, he sold his school to his son, DJ Palmer. And after the sale of the school was finalized, D.D. Palmer went to the west coast of the United States, Daniel David Palmer, where he helped to found the chiropractic schools in Oklahoma, California, and Oregon. Because he was expanding this thing, baby. This stuff was
Bringing
apparently
it
popping off.
nationwide.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like again, if you ever get like a back rub, right? If you ever get like somebody touching you in an area where you can't really touch yourself too often or even at all, right? Like it does just kind of feel good. And so I think people are just going to this thing and saying, huh, that feels pretty good. And Daniel David Palmer's like, oh yeah, and did you know that it can heal all the ghosts in your blood too? Like, I mean, like he's just kind of selling them on this thing. And it's working, I
Can
guess,
you
because
prove him wrong? Can you
can you
prove that
prove
he
him
was
wrong?
wrong?
Yeah, can you do it? I don't know.
All right.
Um, so a lot of stuff happening there. Of course, the early philosophy of chiropractic isn't necessarily reflected in some of the practices today, right? Eventually, as more and more people got into this practice, there was more of this idea of trying to sort of regulate it because, I mean, you know, you should regulate what you do to people's bodies in a medical setting. I think, like in general, I think that's a good idea. I don't
I would
know.
agree with you there. I agree with that.
I mean, like, I honestly like, there is an argument to be made about people's bodies being free from the government, right? And I totally agree to that to some extent. But at the same time, like, I don't want like other Daniel David Palmers of the world to like go, try to fix a subluxation on your grandmother and her having an epileptic fit because of it, right? Because you hit something the wrong way. I mean, like, there are consequences to this, and I can get into some of these statistics on how bad, some people have had it by going to a chiropractor, but it's kind of a mixed bag because again, there's claims and then there's counterclaims to a lot of these sorts of medical malpractice suits, right?
Hmm.
So some claims that people have said have happened have been epileptic seizures, some have been broken bones, some have been disjoints, of the spine, and also in other places on the body, basically like breaking people's bodies in ways that shouldn't have happened because they hit too hard on areas, right? So if this stuff is going to happen, there has to be like practices on, okay, what's going to be like good practice and what's going to be bad practice, right?
So
And
twisting, what you're saying there is twisting and cracking people's spinal columns has risks.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes, it
Okay.
does have risks. I'm no big city doctor.
And you
Okay,
haven't spoken to a ghost as far as I know.
haven't
So your
spoken to.
knowledge is limited.
Yes, it is incredibly limited. So what do I know? But regardless, apparently some people think that there is something to this whole thing. So, wrapping things up here, because I know we got some calls that we want to take. Um, when we get to the state of the practice today, again, it's going to be different in different countries on how you can sort of regulate this. So you don't have to have any medical license or rather, you don't have to go to medical school to call yourself a chiropractor. And chiropractors have been lobbying for decades to try to get into mainstream medical practices. And they do this in a number of different ways. One of the ways that which they do it is to get on people's insurances. So in the United States, if you have health insurance, you probably have it through your employer, right? And so your employer isn't an expert on health insurance. They usually hire other companies that come up with these packages, or they sign up through other kinds of care programs. And those care programs will have some benefits, including chiropractors in there, because it's cheaper to get a chiropractor to cover for some things than it is to get real medical care because our medical system's kind of fucked. So
So it's cost effective as well.
it's cost effective. Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you're having some minor back pains and a chiropractor, like touching your back once a week or something is helping you, then yeah, that's better than going to a hospital and realizing, oh, you have a dislocated disc or something, right?
Right, right.
Um, so again, there's a couple of different practices on how chiropractors do stuff. Some of them again do use X-rays and do talk about subluxations in the way that the World Health Organization defines it, but other ones are not as reputable. And so your mileage is going to vary. I could go into the stuff I have here about what actually counts as a chiropractor, what actually doesn't. But even then, there's debate even within the AAPC, which is the American Academy of Professional Coders, which is what they call for folks who are in the healthcare business in the United States, who like have different ideas about what counts as medical care and what doesn't, right? Because like
Hmm.
if you're gonna have these like itemized medical bills, what exactly are you like treating? What are the treatments? And like, how do you bill for that? It gets really messy because the United States medical care system is again very messy. And if you go to most other countries within the West, they do not have these sorts of practices, which is why chiropractics are mostly
Hmm.
found in the United States more than any other Western nation. So food for thought there. But anyway, that's I think is kind of a wrap here on this subject because we got some calls to get to. But yeah, that's the origins of chiropractic. Scott,
All right.
did you expect ghosts in the mix?
I didn't expect the ghosts or the mixers or the greasers or any of
Hmm.
that stuff. Um, I'm it's it my mind is gone. My mind has exploded from your truth bomb here.
That's it. That's the goal of the truth bomb, baby. Got to
Yep.
make those minds explode. So yeah, super spiritual origins. If you do consider going to a chiropractor, folks, again, I'm not telling you what to do with your lives. Um, ask some basic questions like, where did you get your medical background from? And if they call themselves a doctor, you should figure out, are they really a doctor? Did they go to
Right,
medical
right.
school? And what are the kinds of things that they're going to bill you for? What treatments are they treating you for? If they do an X-ray on you and they say that they can fix parts of you because of your subluxations, and you don't see anything broken in your body, that is a red flag, right? So don't go there. Is my recommendation. But Again, personal opinions of the host of the ACA do not necessarily reflect that of the Atheist Community of
course.
Austin, yada yada yada. So anyway, that's it. That's chiropractic.
All right.
So
All right.
fine
The more you know, right? The more you know.
the more you know. So watch out. And maybe there's some folks who disagree with me. Maybe there's some who've had some positive experiences and said that they've been fixed in some sort of way, and that's cool. But again, I'm not saying that there's no positive benefits to going. I'm just saying there's a lot of risk involved. So take that as
Know what you're getting into. Know
right.
what you're getting into. Definitely.
Exactly. So we need to get some calls here, Scott.
All
But
right.
before we do that, we need to thank the wonderful people who support the show on Patreon. Folks, every single week, I'm always shouting out one person from our Patreon. We call them the Patron of the Week. And if you donate on Patreon, you'll be able to become a Patron of the Week as well. This week's Patron of the Week is coming to us from Paul Sherman. Thank you so much, Paul Sherman. And thank you to everybody who donates on the Patreon. You guys rock. You really do help make this show happen, and it shows the ACA that hey, this is a show continuing worth supporting in the future. So thank you to everybody who does that. And now let's get to the calls.
All right.
Interesting one. We have Xavier who's calling in from Florida. Xavier, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening,
Hey,
Xavier.
Xavier.
I called about, yeah, the topic I called about was religion kind of like, not always, but many times like distorts like your sexuality. Like growing up, I was super puritanical and super abstinent. And the Christian evangelical circles, they kind of give you an inherent message of if you wait until marriage, God will bless you. I really did wait till marriage. I didn't even have a girlfriend. And, it just wasn't really anything more special than any other marriage that for the people who didn't wait. So still waiting for that blessing. Maybe it's in heaven.
No, I think there's something to this because I was taught I grew up in a purity culture, right? Where it's like, so you have to wait until marriage because sex is the most important gift God has given you, or one of the best things God has given you, but He's meant for you to have that with one other person. And if you do that with anybody else, He doesn't like it. I guess I heard different explanations. One of them is which you leave yourself spiritually vulnerable, like literally your spirit is being attacked if you have sex outside of marriage. Another explanation I heard is something along the lines of, well, your bonding with that person is going to be affected because you've had intimate experiences with other people, and that can get in the way of having a fulfilling relationship with a partner. Obviously, I disagree with all that because, hey, not to talk too much about my personal life, but I'm not married and I'm doing just fine. It's great. It's cool. I was abstinent for a very long period of my life. I was actually abstinent up until I stopped being a Christian, which was around 2021-ish. So, do I regret that? I don't know. I mean, maybe it was kind of good that I didn't get into trouble beforehand, but also like I do feel like I kind of missed out a little bit. So I don't know. That's kind of young compared to some people, though. There are definitely some people who called into the show who waited like way longer than I have. So I can see how that can mess some people up.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say that when this topic comes up, I often hear people in atheist groups or whatever saying that this shows that religion is all about control and is all about manipulating. And I don't necessarily know if I think that maybe our caller could chime in with his perspective, but I don't necessarily think that religion goes out with the intent. They don't, we don't see a bunch of old guys in a room saying, okay, so how can we manipulate these people? How can we control these people? Although the types of religions that survive and that thrive and that religious evolution, right? The evolution of religion, the ones that survive are the ones that do have those control aspects. And I think that tying down the reproduction and tying down the thing that every teenager wants to do all the time, right? Tying that down, nailing that down as, the domain of under the control of the church is, if it didn't happen organically, you would think that, boy, that's just a genius stroke. And I'm curious, Xavier, what is your experience as far as, did you feel like this was imposed on you, like you were obeying the church, or did you have beliefs such that you wanted to do this? I mean, was this something that was done against your will, or were you complicit?
Wow. It wasn't imposed on me directly by people. Like, they taught it, but they didn't preach it heavily. Like, because the youth leaders know that they can't control the sex lives of teenagers. Who can monitor that? They kind of just taught it and moved on. It was really imposed by the text, the holy text, like threatening hell. So as soon as like I hit puberty, I'm like, oh man, I might go to hell for these desires. And that really messes up with their psychology. So it was more imposed by the Bible itself, especially Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. If you commit adultery in your heart, something like that, you're in danger of hellfire. So it was really, and what disappoints me the most about it is that, kind of like Danny, I did miss out, but also many others who were Christian, they kind of just got away with it. They took the loophole. They did it. They had their fun, and they just said, "Okay, God, I'm sorry," and they got married anyway. So they kind of had their fun, and they took the loophole. Like, why didn't me and Dan take the loophole?
Right. Yeah. No, I feel the exact same way. Where it's like, I know Christians who have definitely just have had sex and just don't feel guilty about it at all, even though like there's this whole culture that definitely does make you feel guilty about. So it's like, why was I struggling with this guilt? I felt guilty just for having quote lustful thoughts, right? Which is again like something that most people have, right? It's just like a normal, natural human process. So to be ashamed of something that especially most teenage boys are going to be going through in their lifetime, it's just like, it just seems silly in retrospect. But the truth is, you got to think about it also from like a top-down perspective. Why the hell would there be a God that designs us to even have those kinds of thoughts when we're teenagers in the first place? I mean, I wasn't thinking like that when I was like 5 or 6, right? Like, it just didn't appear because I don't know, it wasn't an option. But for some reason, there's a God that designs that, 13-year-old girls do have the ability to get pregnant for some reason. Like, I don't know why you couldn't hold that off to like 18. I don't know why that has to be a thing, but it kind of just doesn't make sense from the get-go. And there's definitely a lot of trauma that can occur because of those kinds of thoughts. And it sucks. It sucks for people who felt like that they were robbed of something, So I definitely feel you there.
So Xavier, looking back on things now that you've left, I think you're an atheist, right? I don't know. Did you mention? Are you an atheist now?
I'm not really an atheist. I'm not really an atheist. Okay. I'm a spiritual agnostic. There could be a God. I don't know. If there is, that's cool.
But you don't think the God is wagging his finger at you for thinking about sex, though? So at least you've migrated your thinking. Now, looking back at your other, do you feel like you talked about feeling robbed or feeling? But at the time, did you regret it? Did you think, oh, I really wish I could do this, or did you think you said it was the scriptures and the quote unquote word of God that was motivating you? Was it because you're like, okay, well, I guess I got to do it, or were you like gung ho, like I'm gonna wow, I'm gonna please God no matter what?
Yeah. Different phases of my life, I was like, I'm doing this for the kingdom. I'm not having sex. And I would preach it to other kids in high school. And I was super proud to spread God's kingdom of abstinence. I don't know. I just thought preaching abstinence would like bring the gospel closer. I thought it would make the rapture come sooner. But other periods of my life, I'm like, I could just get away with this. Like, other people are doing it and they're enjoying their relationships. And I'm kind of like, have to wait. So it was kind of both and in different phases, because I was a hardcore fundamentalist for like 16 years.
Yeah. And isn't it funny using the language there of getting away with it, right? Which is exactly the language that I would use in describing something like that, right? It's this idea that like sex is like this dirty thing. It's this bad thing that that people do in secret and that shouldn't be talked about or shouldn't be explored or shouldn't be glorified in any way. Because it leads to, I don't know, human degeneracy, I guess. And like, yeah, there's definitely like an argument to be made about having too much of a good thing. But I feel like most people who are having sex, and especially again, sex outside of marriages, are just fine. They're just like, they're not porn addicts necessarily. They're not like sex craving lunatics. They're not like, completely thinking about it 24/7. It's just like a natural, normal part of their lives. And you just learn to deal with it like anything else. Like sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's something that you really want, but it doesn't have to like completely dominate you or corrupt you in any way. But that was definitely like the sort of evangelical puritanical understanding that I had, right? Like the more you thought about sex, the literally like the more corrupt your soul may have become, right? The farther you've fallen from God. And that's like such an unhealthy way to think about that kind of thing in a relationship. I mean, like I wish I could tell some of my friends who ended up getting married like very young, 18, 19, 20, who were virgins when they did, say like, hey, you should figure out the sex stuff before you get married, because that might actually be a deal breaker for you in your relationship. And you just don't even realize it yet because you don't even know, you don't even have an opinion on it. Like you don't have anything to experience, but unfortunately that, that doesn't seem to come up. I don't know. They don't ask me about my opinion on those things.
So nobody's mentioned the devil yet. Is the devil part of the whole sexual attraction, or is that not a thing?
I mean, I've never been sexually attracted to the devil, Scott, but I know there's some people out there.
Well, have you met the devil? I mean, he's pretty good looking guy, I think. Yeah. I've been told.
It's so weird, like it's so weird, like when you're told your sexual desires are demonic and of the devil, right? And this is poured into your head since through indoctrination. And then when you finally get married and like your first time with the one you love, you're like, it's still in your head. Like, how does this now go from it's of the devil to, oh, this is good, sacred, and holy? Like, you still have that view of sex that it's of the devil. It's still in there in your subconscious. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is, again, if you look at Paul, right, who writes and says, look, it's actually better if nobody got married. But hey, if you can't control your lust, you should get married. That's like one of his chief reasons for why someone should get married. And it's like, that's just a shitty reason to get married. And how many evangelicals like literally like are just so ready to have sex that they're willing to just like speed run into their marriage, right? Like it's definitely a thing. It's definitely a joke, a stereotype, because it totally happens. And that's just an unhealthy foundation for a marriage, right? Like that's just not good. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, for some people, if that's what you want out of a marriage and you know about it ahead of time, like, sure, that's great. You do whatever. But a lot of these people in this evangelical sect, right, they don't know that. They haven't really subconsciously even figured that out for themselves. So yeah, you're going to be in for a bad time. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls we've had on this show from folks who've had just that experience. So yeah, it sucks. It sucks that this is one of the most toxic parts of Christian culture, is these ideas around sex and how it has really set people back into exploring parts of their sexual identity that they just otherwise just don't have the tools to do, because they grew up in a culture that didn't allow them to do that.
Right.
It sucks. It just sucks. There's no other way to describe it.
Well, if we look at some of the objective facts here, I mean, if saving sex until you're married were a wonderful gift that you can give to your spouse, I mean, you would think that people that do that would have more successful marriages. But I think if we look at the data, we can see kind of either that, depending on the survey, you see either that's not the case or even the reverse is the case. Many religious groups have unusually high divorce rates, especially ones that are so socially restrictive and domineering in that respect. And so the data just doesn't pan out. It's just not there. There's nothing there in their argument. Really, it just all boils down to the same thing at the end. This guy said a thing, and so now we got to do it. and because of God, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. Xavier, any last thoughts before we wrap up this call?
Great points, gentlemen. I guess one little like last point. I guess it can be good for some people. Maybe some people abstinence will be a good thing, but just to make it extreme, like it has to be like that for everybody. It was so toxic. Thanks for your time, gentlemen. Take care.
No, thank you for your time, Xavier. I appreciate you calling in. It's definitely something that, I think people might feel a hesitancy to talk about because of their evangelical upbringing, right? Because there's still some shame lingering around that topic. I definitely felt that shame for a long time, and I thought I used to think, oh man, why does the LGBT community have to talk about sex all the time? Why do they have to be so open about this stuff? It is like I saw that as a bad thing, and now in retrospect, I realize I only thought that was a bad thing because I was uncomfortable with my own sexuality. And not that I struggled with being gay or being bisexual or anything like that. I still identify as straight, but more so that I just didn't have a really healthy outlet for that stuff. My outlet for that stuff was just I don't know, praying to God to take away my thoughts that I was inevitably going to have.
Just push it way down. Just push it all down there. And we know that that's always the beginning of a great success story. Just pack it all down and stick it in the closet.
Right.
As it were.
Right. So whenever you hear about these folks who, think that they've completely cured themselves of sexual desire through some spiritual practices or some sort of enlightenment, I'm always pretty skeptical about that sort of thing. So I think other people should be too, but that's just my opinion. And hey, Scott, did you know that we have some super chats I need to read off?
I am aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear some of them. We actually have 3 right now that I want to read off. One from Kelly Laughlin, good old Kelly, who donated $5. Has been a member for over a year now, who says, just wanted to say hello to Scott Dickey. What a nice.
Thanks, Kelly. Comment. Thanks, Kelly. Back at you. I hope you're feeling better soon.
Yeah, Kelly got a little sick after the back cruise. So thoughts and prayers to Kelly, everyone. Yep. Thoughts and prayers. That's what he would want, I think.
Yes.
Next comes
in fact, he's requested that. I said, please, more thoughts and prayers.
Yes, he said, says it in the message right there. Please, more thoughts and prayers. Yeah, absolutely. Next is from Humanist Reformation, who gives $4.99. Thank you so much for that. They say not having sex has its positives, even from a secular perspective. But it's interesting how religions control people through basic biological desires. And yes, I 100% agree. Choosing to be abstinent is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just for choosing to be abstinent so that you could wait till your wedding or for your marriage because you think that's the best way to have sex because the Bible says so. It's that chain of reasoning that's kind of the problem, right?
Well, like anything else, it's your reasoning that's the important part. It's the why. Why are you doing this or not doing this, as the case may be, and if you're doing it because you've been instructed to, that's one thing. If you're doing it because maybe you don't feel emotionally ready, or maybe you're just not interested, or maybe for whatever reason, that's a different story.
Yes, I agree. And Humanist Reformation makes a great point too. How many religions have rules about sex? Most of them, I feel like.
Isn't that kind of part of the deal, right?
I guess so. It's just a weird thing. It's very interesting that's one of the things. I don't know. Another one from Hell's Bells, who gives was it $5? I can't believe I'm reading this for $5. I'm immediately regretting this policy now of reading anything you guys send me because Hell's Bells says, Dan, shame on you for lustful thoughts. Now you need to say, quote, I am a dirty, dirty boy, and then a winky face. So there you go. I said it for you, Hell's Bells. You gave $5. So I have to follow the rules. So
that was an investment.
Now you can clip it and quote it and make a short of it on TikTok, and it's all gonna be great. It's all gonna be awesome.
Yep.
So, fantastic. Thanks for that help. And while we were reading super chats, we got another super chat, and it's from Jason Friedman, who gives $9.99, who asks a very interesting question: is the world getting better? That's interesting. What do you think about that, Scott?
Yeah, I think in general, the world is getting better as we learn more about the world and the universe. We get better at making life better. We get better at making it better. And so, you know, there's certainly things that periodically come up that seem horrible. Misinformation might be one thing. Um, but I think in general, I'm generally an optimistic person, and I think the world is in fact getting better. And I'm hoping that we can turn some big corners pretty soon, because I think we're coming up. Of course, this is always the case that there's big things on the horizon, and I hope they turn out well. But I'm optimistic.
Yeah, this is like my brain went into a weirdly complicated direction. So there's this moral philosopher named Derek Parfit who talks a lot about population ethics. And it's this idea of like what are more ideal populations, right? Like smaller populations that might be subjectively more happy, or larger populations that may not be as happy. Like what counts for more, right? These sorts of odd questions. And for some reason my brain went to there, and I'm just not a very good I don't know, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into those kinds of questions. What I will say is subjectively my experience in life has definitely gotten better. My life is pretty good, so I'm happy about that. I don't know if I can speak for the literal entire world though. I feel like that's outside of my my bounds to be able to say. I mean, there's always going to be good stuff,
Well, it's
right?
very humble of you to admit that, Dan.
Thank you, thank you. I
Yeah.
know, but it's like I always think about, I don't know, climate change, wars and stuff. I don't know, that always tends to bring me down. But then I also think about, well, I don't know, my life at least is okay. So there's
Maybe Jason was just asking about ping pong. Is the world
yeah,
getting better at ping pong?
yeah. Is it? I don't know.
Not me. I haven't played in a long time.
I haven't
But,
either. Yeah,
so
I can't speak to that. So Jason, if
so
you were
maybe you
asking
have a
about ping pong,
dire ping pong future if that's really what he was looking for.
yeah, you'll need to go to Ping Pong Wanted, which is our sister podcast, which talks about a call-in show specifically about claims related to ping pong. Starting now, actually. So welcome to the first episode. Anyway, no, we're not doing that. I do have some announcements I need to get to real quick before we get to our next caller. Have you ever said to yourself you really like the stuff that the ACA makes and you just wish there was a way you could get all the time? Well, there's a couple different ways you can do that. Two in particular. One is through our 24/7 live stream. AXP TV, which delivers a constant stream of shows, clips, and specials from over 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. And now we also have Heathen TV, which has clips from Talk Heathen as well. So you can watch that on Twitch or on YouTube. You can go to tiny.cc/AXPTV or tiny.cc/Heathen TV and join in on the fun for both of those. Actually, I think both of those are on YouTube, but we are streaming on other stuff like Twitch now, which is fun. And hey, if you are aware, you should be aware that there are a couple different ways to support the show. I've already talked about two of them. One is through the super chats and one is through the Patreon. There's another way you can support the show by becoming a member. If you do that, you get emojis in the chat, you get your name highlighted in the chat, and you'll be immune to the slow mode. And you can do that for as little as 99 cents per month. So that is a pretty cool way to support us. And I'm going to do one more thing here before we move on. We want to talk about the limited edition t-shirt, because every month we are showing a special t-shirt for you. This month is pretty funny. It says that the earth is really flat. How does it wear its pants? And for audio listeners, I really can't explain this joke, but it is two different flat earths wearing pants two different ways, and it is pretty funny. So check that out. And that's just another way to support me, and not me. It's support Truth Wanted. I'm not getting any of that money, but like, showing off the swag. That's always a fun thing to do, right? But now we have to get back to some more callers. Scott, you ready to go?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. This is Spock's Brain, who's calling in from Texas. Like the call sign there, Spock's Brain. You are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, happy Star Trek Day.
Happy Star Trek Day. I did not realize it was Star Trek Day.
This is the anniversary. This is the anniversary of the premiere of Star Trek in 1966.
Oh. Wow. the more you know. There's a random fun fact for you.
There we go.
I like it. Fox Brain, how can we help you today?
A lot of people. Well, first I want to reply to the chiropractic thing. The pseudoscience behind chiropractic is utter bullshit. Although I have gotten some serious relief from going to chiropractors.
Yeah, this is why I thought this would be a controversial truth bomb, because I know from just casual conversations with people that there are folks who totally think chiropractors do real stuff and think that chiropractor stuff is just full of nonsense, but will still go to one anyway because it makes them feel good. So there's definitely like a weird cross section there.
The pseudoscience behind it is bullshit. But believe me, I have walked out of a chiropractor's office feeling a lot better from having my back cracked or my hip pulled or whatever. And I've actually kind of learned to do that for people. It's not rocket science. You just put that bone a little bit. No, but the whole nerve.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't become the next Daniel David Palmer. Okay, I'm on to you. All right. If I see any chiropractor businesses with Dr. Spock's brain on them, I'm gonna call you out.
It's not Dr. Spock. It's a Mr. Spock. You scientifically illiterate person.
No, blew it.
What I really called about was to talk.
And on Star Trek Day too.
Yeah.
Sorry, Spock's brain.
On Star Trek Day. That's why I chose Spock's brain. We've talked a lot of times. You kind of know who I am, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with your voice. I choose as a rule to refer to whatever call sign you call in on the day of the show. But I may or may not have talked to you before. Yes. I am
Coyote Boy.
Yes. Yes. So, well, that's anyway, on you. That's on you to disclose. I have no obligation to do it. But yes.
You're not exposing me. Okay. So.
Oh no, Spock's brain. Are you there? Oh, there you go. We lost you there for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. And now I'm forgetting. Oh. It's. Oh God. Give me a second here. Hold on.
Oh no. Well, here, I'll tell you what the call screener wrote for you. Okay. So they wrote that you were calling about reconnecting with liberal and progressive Christians. And you said that there are good progressive Christians that could benefit the atheist movement. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I went back to my home church that I grew up in. And it's a Disciples of Christ church, which is a very moderate, vanilla, liberal church. And I made a lot of connections, and I'm accepted even as a professing atheist there. How weird is that?
That's awesome.
That's really
awesome.
Cool.
Because we have common goals and values. At that church wants to see Christian nationalism or forced prayer in school, stuff like that. And I've gotten in some online comment fights with atheists who say, no, they're Christians, they're evil, they're terrible. I'm like, no, not. There are plenty of Christians who are moderate and liberal and believe the same things we believe. So I don't know how this will work out, but I'm going to stay in contact and going to this church because I think they could use a atheist humanist up there to inform them,
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but Scott, I want you to take the reins first. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very much in favor of people working together to accomplish things. We had the super chat earlier that says, is the world getting better? And I think that if as much as the world is getting better has to do with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different belief systems, different continents, different countries, starting to work together as we get better at communicating, as our technology develops. The world, they have that phrase, the world's shrinking, right? The world, and it's not literally shrinking, but what it means is that we're able to connect with other parts of the world much more easily. And I think that people working together is going to be a key if we, if humanity wants to make a good, successful go out of this thing. And I kudos to you for reaching out or for being available in that way. I think that, some of my most interesting conversations are with people that believe differently than myself. And, it gives me an opportunity to grow. And I'm also on the nonprofits. And when I'm on that show, I'm talking to people that are mostly in agreement with me. And I like to say, well, we need that as people. We need to talk to people that are kind of in our same vein, that kind of go in the same direction, because that's kind of like a healing environment. But when we're talking about growth, we need to be able to challenge ourselves. Sorry, go ahead,
yes,
Spock's brain.
Yes, those productive.
Yeah, they
said a number of times this week for even saying that some Christians are not total assholes. And I said I share common values and goals with these moderate Christians. I hate to see the atheist community fall into the same trap as the radical fundamentalists.
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue, okay? Because politically speaking, I'm not afraid of the moderate Christian or the liberal Christian, right? I am afraid of the fundamentalist Christian. I am afraid of the Christian nationalists. I am afraid of the Christians who have been campaigning for years to take away women's rights or people's rights to abortion, people's rights to freedom from religion in public spaces, including public schools, right? I mean, this is the stuff that the ACA has had has had a fight in for years, right? So like those are the ones that we are the most disagreement with and where we're going to find the least common values. The fact that I can find common values with other Christians is great, but the secret is, to me at least, is that it's not because of Christianity that we find our common values. It's because we both believe in human decency, or we both believe in thinking about things through, right? And it's like, you don't need Christianity for any of that. I think that's the biggest problem. So, if you can find common values with other human beings that are in your immediate vicinity, that's great. That's wonderful. And I absolutely encourage those relationships. But I don't want to legitimize Christianity in any way. In other words, if I get invited to a Christian podcast, or if I get invited to talk to some Christians on whatever their show, my goal on there is not to say, wow, even we Christians can talk to atheists too, and maybe that, bolsters us in our position a little bit. It's for me to say, no, we share some stuff, but you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong on some of this stuff.
There are some areas that are not shared, definitely.
Yeah, I'm going to call you out for that. So it's a tight rope to walk on. And yeah, people on the internet, maybe not so nuanced in their communication. Sure, I agree with you with that. But it's tough because, I mean, historically, right, Christianity has not had liberal values in any way whatsoever. It has not supported democracy historically, has not supported gay rights, has not supported lots of things that I support. So the fact that there are Christians who may have some newer interpretations, I mean, that's great. But it might be ahistorical, and maybe that's okay. I mean, Christianity's all made up anyway, right? But
excuse me. Let me stop you right there. You're umbrellaing a lot of issues. There were many liberal Christian denominations in the early 1800s. Why are you grouping them all together?
Why am I grouping them all together? Well, because I mean, I grew up as a Baptist, okay? Those were the Christians that the Baptists told me to warn about. You see what I'm saying? Even other Christians don't trust those kinds of Christians, because there is not there's not a uniform interpretation of this text, and that's the big problem, right? How am I supposed to say I agree with the group of people?
Why did you insist that Christians are? Why did you umbrella Christians in those terms? There have been many liberal Christian movements.
There have been many
Martin W. Stone movement, the Unitarian Universalists.
Yes,
there have been. They haven't been very popular, and they haven't had a big following. But there have been Christians who have been willing to be more open-minded.
The vast majority
this is what I've been fighting
for the longest period of time, right? The biggest Christian populations you had were under the authority of the Catholic Church, and outside of that, you had the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? So before Protestantism, you didn't have liberal Christian movements. You had maybe some monasteries that ran some things differently than others, but this wasn't a thing. Again, this is a newer historical phenomenon. For the vast majority of Christianity's history, these liberal Christian movements did not exist. They were newer interpretations of the text. Now, again, I want to clarify here. I'm not saying that's bad. In fact, if anything, that's a great thing. I'd rather people, again, share some of those same values than me. But the problem is it's an inconsistent method into getting to those values. I don't want people to have those values because they think Jesus was a good guy. I want them to have those values because being a good person is a worthy ends within itself. And that's just not something that Christianity in general seems to teach, even amongst the liberal Christians.
How do you know that moderate liberal Christians don't believe that it's just a good idea?
I mean, some of them do. Don't get me wrong, but Spock's Brain, I've had liberal Christian guests on this show.
Thing.
Listen, you want to talk?
Okay.
We're talking about a population of people, Spock's Brain, of over 2 billion people. Yeah, we're going to find exceptions to the rule all over the place. But if we're playing a numbers game here, right, and if we're talking about the issues that matter here, yeah, the fundamentalist Christians have that loud voice, and they are dominating the political conversation. So that's going to be my primary concern, is opposing that voice. If the liberal Christians want to join me in that fight, that's great. But they're I don't know, they don't tend to call into this show. I'll tell you that. Anyway, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make 2 points here. One is to what Spock's Brain was saying, and that yes, there have been some liberal Christian groups, and there still are today. But I think an argument can be made that the impetus, the motivation for liberalizing or softening, or however you want to describe it, changing of the fundamental beliefs, I think, is contact with people that are outside of the religion, contact with other human beings. We saw, we see this kind of thing happening every day as minority groups become more visible. People realize that they have friends that are atheists, that they already respect and care about and trust and know. And so I think that we could argue that it's exactly what you're doing. It's those bridges that I think are helping some of the more severe Christian groups. Second point, to what Dan was saying, yes, there are, and boy, it's slipping out of my brain. Yes, it is the more fundamentalist groups that are the reason that we have shows like this, right? We don't want to have religion legislated to us. We don't want to, I'm not worried about breaking the 10 commandments and stuff like this, but I think that on the same token, that one of our best tools, I think, for interacting with those, how can we make those groups better, is by interacting. Showing, oh yeah, you've known me your whole life, and you've never thought I was immoral before. What's the difference now?
Can I stop you for a second?
Yep,
I'm not
suggesting
that every atheist should go to church, but I had a wonderful experience as a 30-year atheist going back to my home church. I found people who didn't believe in, a global flood, who were open to biblical scholarship, who understood. I had a wonderful experience back there, and I think maybe some skeptics and other doubters might want to make a few more connections with the moderate Christians, because I don't think many of them know any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be the case, right? That might be the case. I can certainly tell you, as someone who grew up in the middle of Texas, right? And not Austin, Texas, Waco, Texas. Okay. I didn't know a lot of moderate liberal Christians, right? They were pretty few and far in between in my radius. So the fact that I learned more about that existence and learned more about things like liberation theology, learning about theopoetics. Holy shit. You want to talk about liberal Christianity? There's some liberal Christianity for you. There's a lot of interesting theological grounds that you could make a case for in terms of Jesus's own personal theology and interpretation of spirituality, right? I think you could make a good case that Jesus could have some liberal tendencies to him. And I'm being completely serious when I say that. But the text is what's made up of the interpreter, right? At the end of the day, it's the interpreter that's going to have that control. And look, if you have that experience, that's great. That's wonderful. I also, for every person that has your experience where they go back to church and they meet some great people. I have callers every week that tell me that they've been traumatized by the church groups that they have been to and have grown up by. And you know what? I don't think they have to give anybody a second chance. If anything,
Well,
the church owes them an
is
apology,
Texas.
right?
It is
The
Texas.
church owes them. I want the church to do some reparations for the work that's done there. I don't feel like I need to do some defense work for the churches and say, well, actually, some of them are all right, right? Like the power differential there is just is too great to ignore, in my opinion. So,
well, I've had an opportunity
thank
to speak at a church once, and I had a very positive experience. I didn't. It was they were having this science and faith kind of series, and so they would invite somebody to come in and talk about the science, and then they'd have somebody else talk about the faith. And so I went in and I talked about the Big Bang, and to Dan's point, I didn't have to. They didn't ask me. They knew I was an atheist going in, and they didn't ask me to pull any punches or anything like that. I had the opportunity to say however I wanted, and I presented my information. You don't have to, talking to somebody doesn't mean you have to. It's not a tacit agreement to follow their beliefs or to endorse their beliefs or to even acknowledge their beliefs. I mean, there are things that we have in common, and I think that positive steps can be made by focusing on those commonalities. Not to say that I disagree entirely with what Dan was saying too. There are people that have had very negative experiences, and it's gonna come down to the individual people involved and their attitudes towards others. When you were, I would ask that of you, Spock's Brain, when you were working with, when you were going to that church, and you said that they knew that you were an atheist. Was that right? And then, so how did they treat you? Were you treated as somebody that was to be converted? Were you treated as, the spawn of Satan or an enemy, or were you treated as just here's a human being, let's talk to this human being?
That's kind of my point. I didn't shout out loud, I don't believe in God, but I made a few points. I put a few feelers out, and I found them open to biblical scholarship. And they weren't anti-intellectual. They weren't anti-science. So, I mean, I've only been there 3 weeks now, so give me a break. But this is a I don't know how much you know about the Disciples of Christ Church.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware.
Ever heard of that?
I dated a girl from Disciples of Christ. No comment on that.
Okay, I'm sure you got laid, but anyway, no. The Disciples of Christ is a very vanilla, progressive, modern church, and I was happy to find that was still the case when I went back there. I grew up in that church from the time I was 5 to 16. Spent a lot of years in that church, and we had a fundamentalist charismatic split in the church, and sadly, I was on the wrong side of that fight. I was speaking in tongues and crap like that, and I went to TCU and became a religion major and quickly became an atheist. So that's my story. So I think that, again, I got a lot of blowback this week for defending progressive and moderate Christians as having the same values as many skeptics, humanists, and atheists do, just because they're Christian. Go meet them. Go talk to them. Go listen to them.
I hear what you're saying, and I get that sense of frustration too, right? Where I do think people, especially in the atheist community, paint way too broad of a brush of Christianity that doesn't capture the individual experience too well, and maybe is more reflective of their own personal experience rather than Christianity as a whole. But I'm done with doing defense for the Christians. If anything, they should be doing defense for me, is how I feel about it, which is a very cynical take. But look, there's one atheist community of Austin. How many churches are here in Austin? You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about going to find Christian community wherever I go in the United States. It's still a struggle for non-believers to even meet up with like-minded folks, let alone have to worry about finding a church where they may or may not accept them for who they are, right? Like that's a danger for a lot of people. It's not as accessible for some folks as it is for others. So It is a complicated
Understood.
subject there.
You make a great point. I just want to make it clear to some vehement atheists: not every Christian is the enemy.
You cut out there for just a second. What did you say?
I said not every Christian is the enemy. There are plenty of Christians who believe many of the same things that we skeptics, humanists, atheists believe and work for. So
I hope so.
Don't convert every theist to the cross-off category.
I mean, I certainly don't. I certainly know Christians. I mean, not Christians. I certainly know atheists who do, and I agree with you. I think that's wrong. But it's kind of like how far should we cast those open arms to the Christian community? I don't know. I think that's going to be a personal question that only individual people can answer. I don't know if there's ever going to be something that we could all come to agreement with. But
that's a great question.
Because we gotta move on with the show here. I am going to let you go here. I do appreciate you calling in, and I think it's a great topic. I really do. And I'm glad you brought it up because I agree. I do share your frustrations. If I have made that clear, like I think people are way too ignorant, quite frankly, on some of the stuff that they say. Doesn't mean they're not completely off base though.
Thank you very much for the call.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that call, Scott?
No, I like the call. Like I said, I do think that communication is important. I'm feeling kind of dirty. Am I like the religion defense committee here or something? And that wasn't my intention. Definitely. I'm on an atheist show. I'm on the nonprofits, so, so there are things that there's, I have an urge to say, hate the belief, and I love the believer. If that wasn't just so cheesy to say, but in a way, I can kind of see along those lines. I mean, I think we need to give people a break. I think we need to give them a fair shake. And I resist the temptation to make assumptions based off of a handful of pieces of information that I know about a person. I will vehemently argue against irrational belief. I'm not even necessarily against religion belief. I'm against irrational belief. It just so happens that religion happens to fall into that category. I'll vehemently argue against irrational belief while trying to sympathize with somebody who is irrationally believing.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Scott, we have to play a quick video. Sure. We're going to show you guys a special way that you can support the ACA, an opportunity that is not going to be around forever. So we're going to play that video for you and show you how you can support the ACA right now.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the Atheist Community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
There we go. And we have another call that we're going to get to in just a second that actually segues into the other call very nicely. So I want to get to that in just a second, but there were a couple announcements that I skipped because I was going all over the script earlier, and I want to make sure I read everything that I have on here for the sake of the ACA. So if you are going to be in the Austin area on August 27th, 2023, we are going to be doing a broadcast live. Actually, it's September, so this date is wrong. So that's not great. We need that part of the script updated. Okay, don't feel too bad about skipping that part of it. But if you want to hear our shows in audio format, hey, there's a way you can do that. It's at tiny.cc/AEN podcast. Guys, you know me. I always say this. I just like to listen to stuff. I listen to podcasts and stuff while I'm working, and that's just my go-to. So if you hate my face and you don't want to look at it, well, you can listen to my face instead by checking out the links to the podcast there. One last thing, if you want to contact the show, You can do that in a couple of different ways. One is through truth@atheist-community.org, or you can reach out to the ACA at tv@atheist-community.org and see what's going on our website at, guess what, atheist-community.org. I said that was the last thing, but I was lying. This is the last thing, which is the Facebook group. We have a Facebook group run by fans for fans, and it's at tiny.cc/FBTWG. You can interact with other fans on that, so check it out. Okay, so we are at the very end of the show, but this call is like in direct response to our previous caller, so I thought it'd be interesting if we could have this take as well. So we're going to take you really quickly, Cross-Examiner. Oh, Cross-Examiner, by the way, gave a super chat earlier that I need to read. Cross-Examiner, who donated $6.68. I don't know if that's a tax thing or what, but you missed the 666 number and said, "Great show. Keep up the great work." And thank you so much for giving the super chat for that.
Thank you. Thank you. No, 668 is the neighbor of the beast. So I didn't want to be.
Right.
On the
same side of the street. I see it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Cross-Examiner, what do you got for us?
Well, thanks for taking the call. I did want to respond to the previous caller. I appreciate his points, and I think he made them fairly well. But I found some problems there, and I just wanted to bring them up. First, it was a bit of a straw man. He acted like everybody in the atheist community is demonizing all Christians all the time, and that's just not my experience. I know that my experience is mine and his is his, but on a whole, when you go and you read the literature, it's definitely on the side of the Christians are the ones who tend to be the ones that get into the negative situations much more. And I'm talking about violence at protests and terroristic threats and all of those sorts of things. Not the liberal ones, of course, but you don't see atheists typically doing what he is saying that is happening. Granted, it does happen, but I just wanted to push that back on that point. The next point is, and the more important points are, liberal Christians don't have to be Christians. You can be liberal and not be a Christian. They're making a choice to be a Christian, and doing so gives cover to the vast majority of Christians in this country that are driving this country towards Christian nationalism. So when they check off surveys, when they stand up and say they're a Christian, when they attend church, they give cover to the more conservatives, and they don't have to. They're making a choice to participate in something that they don't have sufficient evidence for. And my third point is they also raise their children to believe this stuff in a liberal way, but they're still, if they're calling themselves Christian, they are teaching their children to believe something, some element, the resurrection of Christ, God, based on insufficient evidence. And all of those things are still things we can criticize liberal Christians for. I still want to reach out, shake their hands, and work with them, but we can't just say, oh, well, I went to church and had a great time. Well, they could have come to you, but they didn't. They made you come to them because they want you in their church. So those are the highlights.
Scott, what do you think?
I think that's an excellent point, Cross-Examiner, and I'm glad you brought it up. I think that the biggest problem with liberal religion is that it does give shelter to extreme religion. Yes, it's awesome that this group is pro-choice and they're in favor of women's rights and they're, et cetera, et cetera. But they, like you said, they still have irrational beliefs, and that's the problem. Because if what you're saying there is that having irrational beliefs is okay, and so then once you've crossed that line, once you've opened that box, then you've opened the door for it gives shelter. And we talk about this all the time on the nonprofits about how we need to stay engaged with the material, with the content that's coming out of these groups. That if you're going to indulge irrational beliefs in your group, then not only does it make it okay for the next group, but it also kind of undercuts any attempts that you might have to criticize, or that they might have to criticize. Have a liberal group criticizing a more extreme group. They kind of lose their teeth if they're going down that road. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah. So it's a difficult topic because Has the atheist community been absolutely toxic about some of this stuff? Absolutely, 100%. I've been publicly broadcasting my face for about like 5 years now, and yeah, I've seen it. It's definitely been awful. I think sometimes definitely overgeneralized. Definitely don't take things super charitably, and it sucks to see it. I don't think it's what I want to be represented as, and that's why I'm here, because I want to represent myself. I guess I want to be able to show what I think about this stuff, but on the flip side of this, right, I think you bring up some good points here, which is that, look, um, push comes to shove, right? If we think that you believe in something irrational, you believe in something irrational. And if you believe in something irrational, you might come to irrational conclusions. And some of those conclusions are going to end up harming people, right? That's not to say that there's atheists who aren't on their high horse and think all their conclusions are rational and so smart and that they can't be questioned. I see that all the time. But at least there's typically a culture of conversation there, right? Like Christianity, again, we can talk about all the different sects. We can talk about which group does this and which group does that, but doesn't quite have the best track record for open discussion and dialogue. And maybe this is my interpretation and this is your interpretation of it, right? Like there's been very strict hierarchies of interpretation and strict hierarchies of how people should act within the social boundaries of an organization like a church. And the church organization itself can be super harmful. It can be super destructive for the people inside it, as well as have pro-social benefits. So yeah, does it have great things to it? Does it make you feel good when you talk to people who want to do good for the world because they believe in something bigger than themselves? Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. But that does come at a cost, and that's going to come at the cost of not being able to fully admit and come to clear terms with that the values you hold can be held without a God belief. And as soon as you let that go, the more options are going to be open to you to do even more good. If anything, if I became a Christian tomorrow, and one of the reasons why I'm not a Christian today is because I think being a Christian would actually hold me back from being the best person I can be. So, that's just my thoughts on that. But Cross Examiner, we are at the end of today's program. I'll give you the last word here on this call, and then we'll ramp it up. What do you think?
I thank you. You guys do a great job. I agree with everything you said. I think the thrust of it is, yes, obviously people are people, and everybody can be related to on an open basis without hostility and all of that. But I guess my final point about it would be the hashtag not all Christian sentimentality doesn't get us anywhere when we ask, okay, where does the rubber hit the road? Yes, I agree. Not all Christians are like that, but a lot of them are. So that's why we do what we do.
Yep. Yeah. The ACA, trust me, I would not be doing this show if there were just liberal Christians in the world. Okay. I probably wouldn't care enough, to be honest with you. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world that has other kinds of Christians, and not just Christians too. Obviously, this show covers more than just Christianity, but that is like, kind of a big topic that comes up on here, and the other shows that the ACA does. So, Cross Examiner, thanks so much for calling in, and thank you again for that super chat. Really awesome to get to talk to you today. Yeah, great conversations overall. And I again, I want to appreciate the other caller for calling in to bring up the topic, because it's one that I don't think gets talked enough about, to be fair. So yeah, well done on that. Scott,
could I just throw in one more? Could I just make you a liar here, Dan, to slip in something after Cross Examiner's last word? I think what
this is a post-scene credits. This is a Marvel,
exactly right.
Marvel's
extra, free of charge, no additional charge here.
Yeah.
But I think what we're looking at is the difference between the content of a disagreement and possibly a method for remedying that disagreement. I mean, regardless of what we think, we can't argue with the success that of normalization, the success rate that has. We've seen it happen in the LGBTQ community. Obviously, there's still a long way to go in that regard, but 20 years ago, things were very different than they were now. And it's because now people are realizing, I know people in this community, I've interacted with people in this community. And I think we're seeing the same thing happening with the atheist community. As people begin to know, as people get to know atheists and people that believe, that have different beliefs, it's gonna ease that transition as our society matures from a religious society to a post-religious society. And so,
Yep.
if we can talk about the differences and the distinctions and where we should draw the line and that kind of thing. But if we're looking for a solution to that, if we're looking to remedy that, then, we have to look at things that have a successful track record.
Yeah. Is it great when a church supports the LGBT community? Absolutely. Am I going to donate to that church? Fuck no. I'm not going to donate for the basic level of human decency that you should be giving anyway, right? I don't know if you should be getting extra praise for that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that, you should be doing that regardless. So, I guess that's another way to put.
Hooray, you're not an asshole kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or less of one, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Scott, we are going to be doing the after show today. So if you're watching live on the broadcast, we are going to the fan run Discord show. So don't run away just yet. We are going to be taking some questions on there. It's not recorded, so you can ask your questions freely and openly, and come hang out with us for a little bit as we chill out for the rest of the night. Scott, I'm really glad you got to be back for
Me
the
too.
full experience.
Me too.
Yeah. So, Scott, once again, where can people find you at if they want to see more of you?
These days, you can find me on the nonprofits. I kind of messed up last month. I was going to wait till after the Bat Cruise to sign up for my September dates. And so by the time I got there, they were all taken. So starting in October again, I'll be back on the nonprofits every once in a while. So that's mostly where you can find me.
Sweet. And we have to thank the wonderful, fantastic, amazing, stupendous crew that helped make this show happen, because they are awesome and they are really cool. And we'll switch to that crew cam in just a second. Maybe there we go. Look at all those cruising cats. Ooh,
and a bunny.
Yeah. And a bunny too. Oh yeah, that's a bunny. I thought that was a cat for a second.
The crew is up. There was a cat and a bunny.
I'm wearing my thick glasses today, and apparently they aren't helping. So
I got your back, Dan. I got your back.
Thank you, Scott. And we need to give a shout out because Scott had the great idea to say, hey, we need to give a shout out to our backup host, because ever since a few months ago or however long it was, I dropped out in the middle of a show. We've had a backup host just in case.
In suspended animation, right? He's in hypersleep right now. There he is.
Infidel 64 is our backup host today, who's hanging out in the background just in case things go awry. And we're shouting him out today. So Infidel 64, thanks.
Definitely.
Thanks for being there for us. Okay, Scott, we are at the end of the show. So again, reiterating, what's your favorite random fact? Comment below, and we'll pick the top 3 answers next week. But Scott, what I really want to know is words of wisdom. You have any words of wisdom for us this week?
Boy, words of wisdom. I am a dad, so I'm obligated to come up with something.
Obligated.
Here, I'll tell you something I tell all of my classes.
Yeah.
The difference between people that are really smart and people that are less smart is not that the smart people never make mistakes. It's that the smart people learn from their mistakes. There's my words of wisdom.
Ooh, what great words of wisdom. Thank you for that wisdom, Scott. And thank you to everybody who watched or called or commented or participated in some way in Truth Wanted today. You guys are awesome. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch the non-profits and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.